Hello, warm welcome back to the Assist, sponsored by Free Super Tips. I'm Warren Ashurst, and alongside me this week again are Mark Langdon and Dan Childs to go through the weekend's action. The action keeps coming, of course, thick and fast at the moment. It's been a busy midweek of Champions League fixtures, and there's a stacked Premier League coupon as well, with a highlight coming on Sunday at the Emirates. The big match, of course, of the week is Arsenal against Liverpool, third against first in the Premier League. It's Sunday at 4:30 at the Emirates, and Arsenal are 6-4 to pick up the victory. It's 9-4 the draw, and 19-10 Liverpool. Mark, we'll start with you with this one. In terms of the sort of midweek performances, 2 wins in the Champions League, narrow victories, but certainly will boost confidence going into this weekend.
Yeah, I think from Arsenal's point of view, it was just about winning. Sometimes, though, you can win and it just brings about more questions, and it wouldn't have eased the fears, I don't think, of the Arsenal supporters, because it wasn't a fluent performance. It needed a rare save right at the end there, otherwise they might have blown what was a otherwise comfortable game. Trossard not playing his best at the moment, missed the penalties, and Calafiori got injured as well. So you feel like Liverpool sort of gained more from their Champions League midweek. Obviously, they won a tougher game away to RB Leipzig. First 20 minutes was tricky. Last 20 minutes wasn't perfect either. But the middle bit, they really controlled the game, got their goal, and probably should have added more sort of comfort in the victory in the end. But at this stage, it's just, the Champions League, just get your points and finish in that top 8 and move on. But Liverpool have had one day less to prepare, but they'll probably feel sort of better, I would say, after the midweek matches.
In terms of the title race, Dan, are we still looking at the two teams and thinking that Arsenal have the better opportunity to push City because of their overall squad, or have Liverpool impressed you enough so far this season to feel like they might have jumped ahead of them in the queue?
I would put them about on a par at the moment. I mean, you mentioned about Arsenal's squad. I'm not sure that it's looking overly strong. They've had quite a few injuries to key players, but there's a few sort of weaknesses appearing there at the moment. I mean, the game at Bournemouth, although you've got the sending off of Saliba, I don't think they were playing very well. Even with 11v11, to be honest. And the Shakhtar game, they kind of started it strong, and then as the more the game went on, their performance seemed to deteriorate as the game progressed, and Shakhtar had a few chances in the second half. So as Mark's mentioned, I think that's kind of raised more sort of questions than answers, really, that performance. Liverpool had that favourable start on the fixture list, but you can only win your games. They've won all by one of those matches, and now the tougher challenges are starting to come. They've got the win against Chelsea, got the win against RB Leipzig. So for Liverpool, it's looking more and more positive at the moment by the week.
And of course, as we said there, suspension and injury issues, Mark, for Arsenal going into this game. They could be without 4 or 5 first-team regulars. Just what impact is that going to have on Sunday's game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're speaking on Thursday morning, so we're not sure exactly what it's going to mean, for Mikel Arteta. We know that Saliba is out, and Calafiori went off injured in the game against Shakhtar. Bukayo Saka has not been fit for the last couple of games. Odegaard's been missing for a while, and Timber's been out as well. So let's wait and see what the Arsenal team is. Saliba is a big loss because he's one of the best defenders in the Premier League. If you want to win a Premier League title, though, and Arsenal have gone close and were favourites. Let's not forget, it was about a week ago they were favourites to win the Premier League. You've got to be able to cope with players missing, because it's unrealistic to expect Saliba and Gabriel to be able to play every game together. I know last season it sort of they didn't have those issues, but that's not the norm. And Manchester City are missing Rodri, they're missing Kevin De Bruyne. Last season there was a chunk of time when Haaland wasn't playing, and you find a way to either win games or stay in title races. And so from Arsenal's point of view, look, Saliba's a big loss, but you have to be able to deal with that. If you want to win a Premier League title, you can't just assume that your best 11's going to play every week. Now, it makes it a more difficult game against Liverpool, but sort of repeating myself here, but if you want to be considered title challengers, you have to be able to overcome adversity, and that's been the big question mark about sort of Arsenal this season. They had 10 men against Brighton, conceded. Can you not see that out? Even the Man City game, I still think that's a really good point, even if you played 11v11. But Bournemouth, you're playing an hour with 10 men. But I don't think you'd necessarily have to lose that game 2-0 and just shrug your shoulders. I mean, if you want to win titles, I sound a bit like Roy Keane here, but if you want to win titles, I think you've got to be able to sort of be stronger in those sort of moments when it really gets tough.
Speaking of former players, ex-Arsenal striker Ian Wright, Dad, has described this as a must-not-lose game for Arsenal, which, late October time seems very early in the season. Do you think Mikel Arteta would take a draw at this stage, bearing in mind with all the injuries he's got?
Possibly. I think with the players that are out, as Mark's mentioned, it does depend on, is Saka going to be fit? That's going to be a huge differential there. I don't know. With when you're at home, I always think that in these big games that your first thought is to try and get the victory. But will they be gutted if it finishes in a draw? Maybe not. Maybe you're right there, Warren.
Well, let's turn to the best bets then of both Dan and Mark. Now, Mark, start with you. What are you looking at here?
I'm going to go for an Arsenal win. If all of those players are missing, then it might become sort of too much for them to overcome. But Mikel Arteta sounded bullish that one or two might be able to return, and I think home advantage is really important in big games. That might sound really obvious, but I wonder if it's been factored enough into these prices. When Liverpool went to the Emirates last season, they were well beat. It was 3-1 and it was cosy as you like. If you remember, that was the day that Odegaard took the picture, wasn't it? And they were picture perfect on that occasion. I'm not sure the Gunners will be this time around, but I felt the price was, and Warren, you can give us the prices in a minute, but it felt to me like Arsenal had drifted to an acceptable price here to win the game. I would just say with Liverpool, 5 of their last 6 wins have been by 1 goal. Doesn't take much for that winning run to just end, even if you're not doing sort of playing any differently.
Yeah, just to confirm, as Mark mentioned there, Arsenal 6-4 to claim the victory, Liverpool 19-10 and the draw 9-4. What are you looking at here, Dan, for your selection?
I'm going to go with a draw. I just think before I looked at the prices, I was thinking you're kind of minded to try and get with Liverpool in some way. But I agree with Mark. I think those prices have shifted certainly enough. I mean, that kind of makes, with the home advantage there, those prices suggesting that Liverpool are the better side. I mean, you could make a case for saying that possibly they are, but I'm not totally sure on that. A lot will depend on the Arsenal fitness issues. I think the issue at the back is going to be key as well, not just Saliba, but with Calafiori potentially being out, he might have shifted across and played central defence as well. So there's, potentially there's two of the back four, having to change there, which is a bit of an issue for them. But Arsenal's home form, you've got to look at how strong they are at home. They've only dropped points in 2 home matches this season, Aston Villa and the Brighton game, when they were down to 10 men for a large part of that game. So you've got to respect that Arsenal home form. I just have a feeling they'll get something. Draw for me.
Okay, well, just to remind you, it's a 4:30 kickoff at the Emirates on Sunday, the game of the week, Arsenal against Liverpool. Time now for the rest of the Premier League. And we'll start off with Friday evening's fixture, with 2 sides coming off the back of big wins last weekend, meeting at the King Power Stadium. It's Leicester against Nottingham Forest. Leicester 9-5 for the victory, 6-4 Forest, and 12-5 the draw. Dan, we'll start with you with this one. Leicester, big win at Southampton last week, having been 2-0 down, huge for their belief that they can stay up this season. And Forest continuing to probably frustrate the critics of them earlier in the season, because they picked up another useful win against Palace. How do you see this one going?
I'm going to go with Forest on the draw no bet, shade of odds on. I think with Leicester, they're kind of winning the games at the moment that they need to win to kind of, give themselves a little bit of distance to the relegation zone. You got the win against Bournemouth, then that amazing win at Southampton. But you can look at the other side of the Southampton game. and they were being outplayed, for the early part of that game against a team that started the season so badly. I then look at Leicester's kind of underlying stats, if you like. They're the third lowest XG for goals scored, the highest XG for goals against. Now, those are not very flattering statistics. They suggest a team that, over 38 games are going to be struggling still to stay up. I think Leicester are still going to have a survival battle on their hands. Forest, I think, could well be. I know it's early days, but you've got to look at what they've done so far. I think they could be pushing maybe even for a top half finish. Unbeaten away from home. 2 of them games they've gone and drawn away to Chelsea, 1 away to Liverpool. I mean, that's fantastic fall for Forest. I think that the way they play, they're suited as well to playing away from home. One caveat I would say, being a derby game, I think home advantage can sometimes be accentuated in these derby games, so I'm not confident enough to go for Forest just to win the game. I think the draw's a big runner, but Forest on the draw no bet, I think it's a solid bet.
Could be a battle of 2 veteran strikers here, Mark. Chris Wood and Jamie Vardy still finding the back of the net on regular occasions.
They are. Yeah, I thought Vardy was finished a few years ago, and I sort of almost completely forgot that Chris Wood existed. And yet, Nuno has got a real tune out of him. Playing him, I suppose he did with Jimenez, didn't he? When at Wolves, if you remember, he sort of likes that type of centre forward in the ranks. I've got the same bet written down here as what Dan's gone for. Forest draw no bet. I think Leicester are lucky to have 9 points on the board. And it could be vital come the end of the season. They've already got so many and chiseled them away before what could be a tough winter. I think the 2 Forest centre backs are just absolute quality. They get a lot of protection, but they've been outstanding so far. So yeah, Forest draw no bet for me.
Well, there's no early game in the Premier League on Saturday. It's straight to the 3 o'clock kickoff. So we'll start off with a clash at Villa Park. Aston Villa in outstanding form at the moment. Play host to Bournemouth. Villa 17-20 to claim the win. It's 29-10 the draw, and Bournemouth 14-5. Mark, Villa with another impressive Champions League success in midweek, and I watched them against Fulham last Saturday. Really impressed with them there as well.
Yeah, I mean top of the league, aren't they, in the Champions League? Doing great work so far. I think we've spoken a lot about Villa's quality, throughout the season and sort of what Unai Emery is doing. I'm going to shift away from that though for this week. I'm going to go Bournemouth or draw, double chance, and the only reason is I just wonder about Villa and their ability to be able to cope with sort of midweek and weekend games. Now, the results say that they're able to do it, but actually, if you look at the performances, they were really flat against Manchester United after the Bayern Munich game. And after they played against young boys, they only just beat Wolves. They were sort of flagging in that game for a large spell as well. So that's why I'm going for Bournemouth or draw double chance, but not a strong fancy by any stretch of the imagination. I respect what Villa are doing.
Dan, is it fair to say that Villa are possibly being a bit overlooked in terms of a potential title challenge this season? Because you look at last season, people were talking about 2 or 3 teams outside of maybe the big 3, so to speak. And at the moment, they're sat there well within touching distance.
Yeah, I think the difference is, what are we, 8 games in at the moment? That's a big difference to 38. They were they're challenging for half of last season, weren't they? And then, a few kind of injuries and things kicked in. That amazing home form wobbled and they kind of fell well away off the title pacing. Yeah, and I can see that happening, but I can also see them, which I'm sure they'd be happy with, winning that race for a top 4 spot. I think they've got a great chance of ending up, maybe nicking 4th place. I don't really get the market indifference to Aston Villa. I'm looking at their squad health at the moment. It looks like, they played Bologna on the Tuesday, so they've got a good enough run of days, to get ready for the weekend. And the squad looks pretty healthy at the moment. They're doing fantastic in the Champions League and the Premier League. Got fantastic, ability up front, including off the bench, as we mentioned with, Duran on a number of occasions. And Bournemouth, I like Bournemouth the way they play. They attack games, but away from home, they're suspect. I think that the only away win was at Everton, where they were 2-0 down with a few minutes to go. Lost away to Leicester, as I mentioned a bit earlier. Not convinced by them away from home. Villa for me to win.
Okay, the next 3 o'clock game on the agenda is Brentford against Ipswich. The Bees 4-6 to pick up the victory. Ipswich 7-2 and the draw 100-30. I just wonder, Dan, how much that defeat to Everton last week will impact Ipswich and their belief that they can stay up this season, because that was a game that many people thought they could target for a victory, and in the end, they were pretty well beaten.
It was a poor performance and a worry because a lot of people have been saying that they're going to rely a lot on their home form. It is only one game though. I mean, there are some, they can look back at some better performances this season. Got the draw, away to Brighton. Got a late equaliser away to Southampton. So there's brighter spots there not too long ago that they can look to. And I'm going to go with a draw here. I'm not totally sold on Brentford, actually. I thought the Man United away game last week was a good time to play Man United. Pressure on Ten Hag, going one down with the Lick being off the pitch. And then Man United really took over in the second half and Brentford had no answers. Ipswich at home is obviously an easier fixture, but Brentford are conceding a lot of goals. I think it's 10 games now in the Premier League without a clean sheet. Not completely sold on Brentford, so I'll take Ipswich to get the draw.
How about you, Mark? How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I'm going to go for a Brentford win. I am worried by that Ipswich performance against Everton. Lost the shots on target count 8-2. That sort of followed what was a really poor performance against the West Ham side that, not pulling up any trees at the moment. They gifted them 4 goals as well. And then I think Brentford really clever at targeting certain games to be right at it. And Thomas Frank's side have already beaten Palace, Southampton on Wolves at home this season. I think they'll look at this game as they'll almost be treating it sort of cup final-esque as a massive moment for them to get 3 points and sort of really sort of push themselves probably a third of the way towards safety by sort of the end of October. So I'm going to go for a Brentford win.
The Amex Stadium is the venue for Brighton against Wolves at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Just a quick look at the Premier League table earlier on. Couldn't quite believe that Brighton are as high as 5th, but it just indicates how well that they've done, Mark, this season, trying to build on that impressive win at Newcastle last weekend.
Impressive result. I thought the performance was like they were outplayed. Don't ask me how, but I was watching the full 90 minutes of that game, and I couldn't believe that they won the game. I mean, they were battered for a large part of that. Felt like any moment now Newcastle would score. Isak missed 2 really good chances. Yeah. There were other moments. It was a very strange sort of Brighton performance because I haven't actually seen them play like that. I can't remember ever seeing them play sort of backs to the wall the way that they did. Now, they managed to sort of grind it out and nick the 1-0 win. And, if they can find other ways to play outside of kind of, the usual style, then that should add to their ability. But I thought that they did give up a lot of opportunities in that game, 21 shots against Newcastle. So I was just looking at Jørgen Strand Larsen, first goal scorer each way. I can see Wolves scoring in this match. They've scored in their last 9 games. Whether they're good enough defensively to keep out Brighton, I don't know. But JSL, as I'm now calling him, he scored in his last 2, so he might be able to take advantage of a Brighton team that does give up opportunities.
Not to be confused with the previous boy band JLS, who are certainly not playing up front for Wolves at the weekend. Just looking at what Wolves did against Manchester City, Dan, at least there was something to take from that game. A better performance, frustrated City for periods, but I just wonder how much that late goal will have impacted them going into this match.
Yeah, it's a huge blow. I don't know. I think a full week though to get over it is enough. I go back to I've mentioned many times before about Wolves' start to the season. That 6 of their opening 8 games against teams that finished in last season's top 7. I mean, it's an absolutely brutal start, and they haven't had that many games where they could say we can target and try and get results. So they got a point, I think, away at Forest. The other one that they would target, they lost 5-3 at Brentford, poor performance. But I can actually see them getting something. I'm going to go with Wolves or draw, double chance. As you mentioned, Warren, the defensive structure was better against Manchester City. That hasn't been the case this season for Wolves. It gives them something to build on. And Brighton were lucky to get that win at Newcastle. The result, sometimes it papers over some pretty wide cracks. I thought they gave out a lot of opportunities in that game. I don't think 5th place, based on their performances at the moment, is sustainable over 38 games. They've drawn 2-2 at home to Forest, 0-0 at home to Ipswich. Not sure they'll win this game against Wolves.
Should mention as well, of course, that Danny Welbeck might miss out after scoring the winner at Newcastle. He picked up an injury at St James's Park off the back of it. The other 3 o'clock game on Saturday is at the Etihad. Manchester City against Southampton. City 1-9. Southampton as big as 16-1 to claim the victory. It's 9-1 the draw. Dan, we seem to say this every week that it's hard to make a case for whoever is away at the Etihad Stadium. Certainly going off what happened with Southampton last weekend, it's even more so.
Absolutely. I'm going to make a cut. No, I'm not going to make a case for Southampton.
I'm just going to stop you there.
No, I mean, Southampton, it seems to be, the problem is when you go to City, you need to be, to make life difficult for them, a little bit like Wolves did. If you're inferior, you've got to have a real good structure and sit and be diligent at your defensive jobs. And that's not the way that Southampton play. There doesn't seem to be a plan B there. I mean, maybe they'll attempt a plan B here at Manchester City, but I'm not sure they're going to be particularly good at it. I do think Southampton, because of the way they play, they probably will create chances and may even, get themselves a consolation goal. That kind of feeds into the tip. Going to go with Man City and over 3.5 goals. They've not quite clicked, since the Rodri injury, but I think if it's going to happen, this will be the weekend, where they run up a big score. So City and over 3.5 goals.
Of course, at the moment, Mark, there's a lot of talk amongst the betting fraternity about who might be the first manager to get the sack. I mean, Russell Martin's odds have probably slashed massively over the last kind of 2 or 3 weeks. I just wonder whether, a heavy defeat at Manchester City might leave him on the edge.
Yeah, he's favourite, isn't he, now? I think that is harsh. Had they lost the playoff final, he would have kept his job. Southampton would probably be riding reasonably high in the Championship. I'd expect them to be sort of top 6 after what they sort of showed last season, probably higher given the standard of the Championship this season. And people would still be talking about Russell Martin doing a good job. The problem is he's got Championship players playing in the Premier League, and he's principled in the way that he wants the team to play. That's why he got the job at Southampton. That's why he got the job at Swansea, and it's been relatively successful. But as Vincent Kompany showed sort of last season, if you've just got worse players and you try to outplay teams, it usually ends badly for you. And I'm not sure that he will change, because it's got him this far. It's taken him from MK Dons to the Premier League. So, I mean, he'll say on a personal level that it has worked, and with better players, I think he could actually be a very good manager. But this looks an impossible task. I've got Man City in over 3.5 goals down as well. City, even when they thrashed Sparta Prague in midweek, gave up an opportunity, and Wolves didn't have much of the ball and created chances. So they're definitely not perfect at the moment, City, but going forward, they should be licking their lips here.
The 5:30 game on Saturday is at Goodison Park. Everton against Fulham. There are less and less of the Goodison matches left now before they move to the new stadium. But the home fans should be buoyed by what's gone on in recent weeks. Everton 17-10 to claim the victory here. The draw is 12-5, and it's 8-5 Fulham. Mark, what's your thoughts on this evening game?
I've gone for the draw in the Marco Silva derby. Everton 5 unbeaten in all competitions. They've only won 2 of those. I think Fulham are a decent side. They've surprised me with their ability this season. They did lose that game to Aston Villa last week. There were sort of key moments that went against them. Pereira's penalty was saved. Anderson was sent off. I don't think they'll lose sort of too much sort of confidence after that defeat. They played well at Man City when they lost as well there. So this game against an inferior opponent to what the couple of games that I've just mentioned there, might be able to get something out of the game. I think it would be a low scorer.
Anderson, of course, suspended after his sending off against Villa last week. Does that have any bearing on this, do you think, Dan?
I think so. That was actually the thing that kind of edged me towards Everton. I'm going to go with Everton on the draw, no bet. This was probably the toughest game of the 10 that I've looked at this weekend, knowing, kind of which way to go. I think the draw is quite a big runner, but Everton, the Goodison factor at the moment. Earlier on in the season, the crowd were edgy and nervous. Now they're 4 games unbeaten. There's been a mood change at the club. The injuries seem to be clearing up for Everton. I agree with Mark. Fulham have looked a good side, and they're probably going to have injuries permitting, have a decent season. But I don't think it's a great time to go there. Maybe against a team like Everton that played direct, losing Anderson may just be the key to Everton getting the home win.
Okay, there are 4 more games on Sunday. We've already, of course, had a look at Arsenal against Liverpool. So the remaining 3 are all 2 o'clock kickoffs. And we'll start off with the clash at Stamford Bridge as Chelsea take on Newcastle. Chelsea 4-5, Newcastle 29-10, and the draw around 16-5. Dan, we'll start with you on this one. Did Chelsea show enough in that Liverpool game last week to suggest that they're still on the right path and they can pick up a victory on Sunday?
I think so. I think if you're just looking at performance, watching the game, had some good chances, controlled the game really for quite long spells. Good spells of possession. You can't always just go by the result. They were defensively, they're a little bit shaky at times, but that's to be expected. You had Fofana and Cucurella both suspended. They're back now for this weekend. Shade of odds on against Newcastle. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I'll go with a Chelsea home win. Newcastle played well against in that defeat against Brighton last week, but they're never anywhere near as reliable on the road. I don't trust them on the road, so Chelsea home win for me.
Is the lack of Newcastle goals a concern for you, Mark, going into this one?
I don't think the lack of goals is Warren, because Isaka, I think, has shown over time that he is a very good striker. He's been linked with like £100 million moves, wasn't he? Not that long ago, and he probably hasn't sort of hit those heights this season, but I think he's perfectly fine centre forward that will get his goals eventually. And Gordon still looks dangerous, and they've got quality in midfield with Guimaraes and Tonali and players like that. So it's not the goal scoring that's the problem. I think it's defensively that I've got my concerns with Newcastle at the moment. Botman was a big part of what Newcastle did when they were playing at their best, and that partnership with Cher has disappeared now, and they look more vulnerable in the fullback positions. If you think to like Kieran Trippier, been injured and not playing at the sort of highest level now, so you've got like 2 youngish fullbacks in Livramento and Hall. Byrne and Cher's not the perfect partnership defensively either, and so I just wonder whether Newcastle have got that ability to play in a low block and frustrate Chelsea, because that's what Palace did, that's what Nottingham Forest did, and I don't think they actually have got the players at the moment to do that. So agree with Dan, Chelsea win.
Okay, there is a London derby at Selhurst Park. Crystal Palace against Tottenham is another 2 o'clock kickoff. Palace 3-1, the draw 3-1, and Tottenham 4-5. I'm sure, Mark, there was probably maybe a few disgruntled Spurs fans when Kudos scored the opener last week, but they responded in fine fashion and got a comfortable win in the end.
Yeah, I think that it was okay. It was just about to turn, and then Kulusevski equalised. You could feel the tension rising, but actually, I think if you were not kind of emotionally involved, if you weren't a Spurs fan and just watched that game, you would have felt like Spurs would come back and win. They were playing well even before they equalised and then stepped it up in the second half. So I think from Spurs' point of view, they're playing well. They're second on expected goals. I keep on mentioning that, and I will do until they slip away. My bet for this game, actually, though, is Tottenham to win the first half, because if you remember that last Europa League game, they went out like a light, didn't they, against Brighton in the game that followed. And so I just wonder with the RZ Alkmaar game whether the same thing happens. Maybe it won't, maybe it will. But Tottenham tend to start fast. They've been winning at half time in 5 of their last 6 games in all competitions before that RZ game. Palace are low on confidence. Good opportunity for Tottenham to win.
Yeah, you on the similar mindset here, Dan?
I'm going to go with Spurs to win under 3.5 goals, which may seem strange because, when Spurs play, there's often lots and lots of goals. I just think that Brighton game, I know Ange's a very attack-minded manager, but I don't. It's coming to the stage now. The away form has not been good enough, and they need to start winning some of these away games. I mean, will they be as gung-ho and loose as they were, away to Newcastle and away to Brighton? I think they might be just a little bit more disciplined. You had the half-time change against West Ham where he brought Sarr on for Maddison and just improve the defensive balance, if you like, of the side. And I just think that they might not be quite as gung-ho as they have been earlier in the season. Palace as well, they're they're very passive against the big teams. I watched their game against Manchester United that was 0-0 at home. Sat very, very deep, content to kind of play on the break. They didn't really have many breaks. Similar with the 1-0 loss at home to Liverpool as well. They do frustrate these attack-minded teams, but they offer very little threat. So I actually think, contrary to what usually happens with Spurs, this might be a low scorer, but Spurs will get the job done. Spurs and under 3.5 goals.
Okay, last but not least is the London Stadium that hosts West Ham against Manchester United at 2:00 on Sunday. The Hammers 15-8 to claim the victory. United 13-10 and the draw around 11-4. We had a report this week, Dan, that suggested that Lopetegui's got until the international break in November to try and turn things around for West Ham. I mean, we said, and in fairness, you guys in particular said at the start of the season, it's going to take time for West Ham to gel. But I just wonder whether they will have the patience, the owners, in order to give him that time to get the team playing the way he wants to.
Yeah, I think it's another manager at risk derby, isn't it, this one? I think West Ham have generally shown patience with managers. David Moyes, through his time there, they did have a few rocky runs and stuck by him. So I think they probably will and should, give him a little bit more time. It's quite a different, new look squad that West Ham have got there. I think this is the game they might actually turn things around. The decent price for me to win. Manchester United, I think the build-up doesn't suit them. They're going to Fenerbahce on the Thursday night. I looked into that game. Man United squad, they've got a lot of injuries at the moment, so they almost can't. They have to go with a strong team because it's all they've got. They haven't got many senior players that they can rotate. So that means you're playing virtual first choice side in Istanbul on a Thursday, then going to West Ham. You don't know what, maybe knocks or injuries or fatigue that they're going to pick up from that game. I think that might just give, an outsorts West Ham the edge and maybe they can get the win.
A defeat either way, Mark, leaves whoever is on the losing end under pressure in terms of manager. But as Dan mentioned there, are the United squad issues maybe edging you towards a home team here?
West Ham are missing Kudos as well after his crazy antics towards the end of that Tottenham game. Could have been sent off a couple of times. But I'm actually going to go for West Ham as well. I think that the travel disruption is definitely not perfect for Manchester United. And Warren, I will correct you there because West Ham are United as well. And I remember once Steve Palmer got in terrible trouble for referring to Manchester United as United. On sort of local radio in Newcastle. So he then apologised to all Geordies listening, which would have been every single one of them. But from the point of view of this game, I just felt West Ham, as bad as they've been, outsiders at home to Manchester United, who've got a few injuries, got the travel to Turkey on Thursday, and I can't trust to kind of put in 3 or 4 performances on the spin together. West Ham has still got a lot of talent even without Kudos in that final third. Paquetá, Somerville probably comes in. You got Bowen. There's enough there, I think, for West Ham to trouble Manchester United. I'm going to go for West Ham draw no bet.
Okay, that's the Premier League covered then for this weekend. Up next is the EFL. Well, our match in focus in the EFL this week is at the top end of League One. It's Mansfield against Birmingham, a 12:30 kickoff on Saturday at Field Mill. We'll run through the prices in a moment, but we'll just get Dan's thoughts firstly on, in terms of the push for promotion in League One. We mentioned right at the start of the season, Dan, when we were previewing the action, that Birmingham really, in theory, were quite rightly the short favourites to go up, but it would potentially go one way or another. As things stand at the moment, are they going to go on and cruise this title, do you think?
I think so, yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if it was, this sounds crazy, but like 15 points by the end of the season. I just think they are in a class of their own in the division. They've, their spending for that level has just been absolutely insane. Record for a League One club. Just the Stansfield deal alone was huge. Of revamped the whole squad and kept some players from the Championship that are still very, very strong as well for for League One. I just don't see Wrexham of trying to hound to their coattails. Mansfield, who they're playing against, are only 5 points behind them at the moment. But no, I see them cruising the title.
In terms of the prices, Mansfield 15-4 to win at home on Saturday. Birmingham is short as 3-4, and the draw is 13-5. You mentioned, and I loved that the other week, Dan, when you mentioned about Nigel Clough being very honest about Mansfield this season. And I suppose he'd probably be honest going into this game that quite rightly they are the underdogs despite having home advantage.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned it, Birmingham as short as 3-4. That's not short enough, in my opinion. I just think that they played Bolton at the start of the season, would have been considered, well, they were considered by myself as being one of their main rivals for promotion, and played at home to Bolton on the Tuesday, won the game 2-0, scored early, still had over 70% possession against Bolton, who are a very attack-minded, possession-based team, won the shot count 18-8, cruised to victory in the end. Now that shows the kind of level that they're at. They had a tough game at Lincoln last weekend, conceded early, came back and won 3-1. They can win games in so many different ways. Mansfield, I mean, if they win, they're only 2 points behind Birmingham, which is incredible. And they're continuing to sort of scrape results. They won 2-1 at Wigan on Tuesday and lost a shot count 22-4, Mansfield. But I do think that they're likely to get a bit of a chin in one of these days, and more likely than not to happen against Birmingham. So Birmingham to win the game.
Okay, Dan's going for Birmingham. Matt, just a quick word from you on how Birmingham have gone so far. Have you been impressed with what you've seen?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I was one of those that sort of said if you're having a bet in League One this season, sort of anti-post, then sort of bet a team each way or promotion in case Birmingham do absolutely dot up. I wasn't sort of sure that they would when we were doing sort of the season preview sort of in very early August, and there was still doubts in some respects because there was an untried manager. They hadn't sort of made all of their signings by then, and the ones that they did were from abroad, and you can never be entirely sure what's going to happen. It looks like the manager Davis is somebody that has got more levels in him. He was highly rated as sort of a coach, so he stepped up to that level. The players are clearly above League One. I think away from home, the interesting thing for me is that it's a bit cliche, but it's like a cup final for every other team. So whoever Birmingham play is going to be like the biggest game of the season. So they have to deal with that, but their sort of suggestion in sort of terms of recent results, I'm looking at that Lincoln one last week, was that they were still able to cope with it. So I'm sure the Mansfield locals will be out in force and sort of looking to make things uneasy for Birmingham. But ultimately, this is a team that probably should be in the Championship playing in League One.
Yeah, arguably then EFL's biggest game of the weekend. Mansfield against Birmingham, a 12:30 kickoff on Saturday. We're going to stick with the EFL now because Dan will go through his 3 selections across the Football League this weekend. What are we starting with, Dan?
I'm going to stick with League One. First up, going to go with Peterborough or draw, double chance away to Bolton at odds against. I mentioned Bolton's performance at Birmingham, and it's no disgrace to go and lose to Birmingham, but I just thought the manner of it, wasn't great. The fact that they've gone there as an attack-minded, possession-based team, and not really, kind of landing any blows, if you like. Last weekend they won 2-1 at home to Burton. Burton have since sacked their manager after their midweek loss, so they don't seem to be, really, playing on top of their game at the moment, Bolton. And Peterborough have had a 5-1 midweek win at home to Blackpool, Blackpool have been doing really well under Steve Bruce. So that catches your eye. You think that Peterborough, as they seem to have done for many, many years, are scoring lots of goals and conceding lots of goals. But they're a dangerous side, and I think they'll get at least a draw away to Bolton. Going to drop into League Two for the second pick. Salford draw no bet away to Colchester. Salford did a lot of their kind of transfer business late in the window, started the season quite slowly as a result, but some of those players they got in later, high quality players for the level, and they're picking up now. Salford, their form's improving. They got 2-1 win at home to Swindon on Tuesday, but they were quite dominant in that game. Drew 1-1 at Crewe last weekend. Crewe, a team flying quite high, so Salford are improving. Colchester, I expected them to have a good season. I still think eventually they'll get higher up the table, but they've got quite a few injuries at the moment. They've only won 2 games, no winning 6. So Salford draw no bet at about 13-8 looks a really big price to me. Finally going to go with MK Dons in League 2 again to win away to Grimsby. MK Dons started the season slow, got Scott Lindsay in from Crawley, who done an amazing job to get Crawley up last season. He's gone in there, a struggling team, and they've took 11 points from 6 games under him. Last 2 away games, they won 5-1 at Harrogate, 3-1 away to Morecambe. So they're strong on the road, MK. Grimsby going well at the moment. I think they're in the 7th place, just nicked into the playoffs with a 1-0 win at Tranmere on Tuesday, but they're not great at home. Lost 3 of the last 4 home games, including a 4-1 loss at home to Walsall last weekend. I think this is almost as tough as the Walsall game, so MK Dons to win this one.
So just to reiterate then, Dan's 3 selections for the EFL this week. Peterborough double chance, Salford draw no bet, and the MK Dons. We're going to turn our attentions now back to the Premier League and time for Mark Langdon's Bet Builder. So Mark, which game are we looking at here for the Bet Builder?
Yeah, it's maybe not the highlight of the Premier League card, but there were so many injuries and so many doubts about what's going on elsewhere, with the Thursday games that we're speaking ahead of. So I've actually gone to Goodison Park for this week's Bet Builder. Everton against Fulham. Not expecting a classic in terms of goals. So under 2.5, I think is a fair old shout. Everton, it's never going to change really under Sean Dyche. They will be organised defensively. They haven't got a huge amount of goals in them. So under 2.5, one of their sort of bright attacking sparks this season has been Dwight McNeil. So I'm going for him to have a shot on target. He's had a shot on target in 6 of his last 8 appearances for the Toffees, a player that Dyche knows very well and seems to be getting the best out of him. And I'm also going for Mykolenko to be carded. I think he's actually underrated left back. I do like him, but up against Adama Traore, if Traore plays over on that right-hand side, is a difficult one-on-one duel as you can get sort of outside of the obvious big boys. So I'm going to go for Mykolenko to be carded in the game. Dwight McNeil to have a shot on target and under 2.5 goals in the game.
Yeah, and Mykolenko's task is going to be hard when you consider that Adama Traore outpaced Kyle Walker a couple of weeks ago in the game between Man City and Fulham. Mark's got a prop shop for us as well to look forward to this week. What have we got, Mark?
I'm going to the Crystal Palace Spurs game for this one, and I'm going for Eze, or Ezzy, as everybody seems to call him now, to have over 2.5 shots in the game. Anyone that watched Monday night's sort of defeat for Crystal Palace at Nottingham Forest, I think Eze would have gone into the notebook for the shots market, because he was shooting from absolutely everywhere. I think it was 5 shots outside the box. He clearly feels like he's got to sort of do it all himself at the moment. Mateta's not been sort of in the same form as what he was last season. I think the Nketiah signing was quite a dodgy one, really, from Crystal Palace. Elise was sold to Bayern Munich, so he sort of feels that responsibility. He's had 13 shots in his last 3 games, so he's getting desperate. Tottenham do give up sort of space and opportunity, so he might be sort of the man most likely for Crystal Palace. So Eze to have over 2.5 shots.
Okay, well, time now for the Assist Treble. Dan, we'll start with your selection. Who are we looking at here?
I'm going to go with Aston Villa against Bournemouth. I just don't really get the lack of market confidence in Villa. Just a shade of odds on for this one. I mentioned Bournemouth, their attacking style, and they're not great away from home. I just think Villa will have a little bit too much.
Mark, who's your selection for the treble?
Going for over 2.5 goals at Selhurst Park between Crystal Palace and Tottenham. 30 of Tottenham's last 35 Premier League games have had over 2.5 goals, and that includes both matches against Crystal Palace. Spurs have got the best attacking XG in the league, and that's without them sort of going down the penalty route. So, a team that's creating a lot of opportunities, never trust them for a clean sheet, particularly away from home.
I was going to edge towards Chelsea against Newcastle, but I've decided instead, because it was a better price, to dip in to League One for my selection. I'm going with Cambridge to beat Burton. Dan just mentioned there before that Burton have sacked their manager, so I suppose sometimes you do get a reaction from that, but I just think they're a poor team, rock bottom of League One at the moment. They've lost 7 in a row, going into this trip to the Abbey Stadium. Cambridge have won the last 2 as well. They've beaten Wigan and Stevenage, teams above them in the table. They're 4 points from the safety zone now after those 2 back-to-back wins, and I think Cambridge can win around about 21-20 on Saturday against Burton. So just to remind you that Villa is the selection for Dan at the weekend, and Mark has gone for over 2.5 goals between Crystal Palace and Tottenham, and I'm going for Cambridge to beat Burton in League One. And we'll conclude this week's assist with the naps from both Mark and Dan. Mark, we'll start with your nap.
I'm going for Brentford to beat Ipswich. I really think that sort of the last 2 performances, it is only 2 performances, but the last 2 performances from Ipswich have not been to the required standard against West Ham and Everton, and Brentford really target these home games against teams, in the bottom 6 or 7. So yeah, Brentford is the nap.
And what's your nap, Dan?
MK Dons to win away to Grimsby. I'm a massive fan of MK Dons' manager, Scott Lindsay. I think he should be managing at least 2 levels higher. I'm sure he will be, at some point in his career. They had MK Dons 7 points from 7 games before he went in there. They got 11 points from 6 games since he's arrived. Grimsby is 7th in the league, but their goal difference is -5. So it suggests that might not be sustainable. MK Dons to win.
Okay, well, my thanks to both Dan and Mark again for their input this week on the assist. Don't forget, of course, to like, subscribe and comment. And just a quick reminder that if you like your golf, then make sure that you catch the Sweet Spot every Tuesday with Steve Palmer. We'll be back, of course, next Thursday. In the meantime, enjoy your football this weekend, and please remember to gamble responsibly.